think we need to be careful about not equating endemic COVID with pre-COVID or no COVID, because endemic COVID has a very different story to it. And as we've spent years learning about what endemic COVID is, when we started off thinking about COVID, we really equated it to a natural disaster, something that shut down all activity. It required massive amounts of stimulus and then resulted in the economy booming afterwards. But as we think about endemic COVID, instead of it thinking about the economy completely shutting down and then booming, the way we've increasingly begun to think about the global economy is as a permanent amount of activity is shaved off, and this actually lowers potential over time. When we think about endemic COVID, we've effectively come, or COVID's impact on the economy, we've come to recognize it can be impactful in one of two ways, and this is true to any economy in the world. Either it affects your behavior, it means that perhaps I don't want to attend a conference or go to a crowded concert. That would be one way, and that's usually personal. And what we found over time is that each subsequent wave of COVID reduced the impact on behavior, but didn't eliminate it entirely. When we talk with epidemiologists, what they tell us is that we'll probably see something like seasonal COVID, which means we may see seasonal behavioral changes as those who are perhaps immunocompromised are not interested in participating in the economy as much, or they shift things. And then, of course, there's the permanent behavioral shocks, everything from work from home to desire to move away from high touch areas to permanent changes in our consumption basket. For example, only going into the office 3 days a week may change the way that we consume in general. But that's not the side of endemic COVID that really has kept us up at night. Even when we started developing this framework back in the fall, we talked a lot about how what really is challenging from a market's perspective is not individual behaviors, but government restrictions and imposed policy choices. So what are the key investment themes that come from this sort of endemic COVID paradigm with reduced visibility? Well, one is that we are likely to see regional winners and losers. We are likely to see those that have, for example, high vaccination rates or effective vaccines probably outperform and see less impact to their economy than those that don't. We're looking for sector winner and losers because endemic COVID is slightly inflationary. As I said, our post-COVID inflation outlook is not extreme, but it is a little higher than pre-COVID. So we're looking for outperformers, sectors, and companies that have pricing power, quicker transition, and a reduced need or dependence on labor is going to be very important. One thing we haven't talked a lot about is just how much mass retirement we've seen, and that labor pool is shrinking. And finally, something Sue and I care very passionately about is just how challenging it's going to be to effectively remove policy accommodation. That in the long run, even though we're talking about rate hikes now, we probably are existing in a world with a lower potential growth, lower neutral rate, and a larger share of government spending. Once you inject that, very difficult to take it away.